Welcome to SAS, a podcast where science meets spirituality with a little bit of sass, your guide to awakening with a twist. I'm Katie Kowaleski, your host, and I look forward to helping you on your awakening journey. I've been a marriage and family therapist for almost 11 years and have been specializing in holistic self-care tools for the last 5. I found that healing and growth are optimized when mind, body, and spirit tools are combined with cognitive behavior and solution-focused therapeutic techniques, creating sustainable change that can be easy and fun. All of our podcasts discuss science and spirituality and really talk about tools and topics that are imperative to the human awakening experience. We look forward to meeting you wherever you are, and welcome to SAS. A little bit of background on when this was recorded and what was happening. This was recorded during Katie's 8-week trip to Michigan. So I go to Michigan every summer with my mom, and we stay in this little cottage on a lake in the middle of nowhere. And it was her mother's cottage before it was hers, and then it was her great-grandmother's before that. So there's a ton of history there, and I find it really restorative every summer. It's a really important time for me. And this year was especially important. Obviously, there was a lot of chaos going on worldwide with the pandemic. So it came at a really great time. And it was interesting, the timing of going up there, because I was going through my own transformation with my relationship with her that started in February when I was getting out of a relationship I had been in. I was going through a breakup with a man I was engaged to. And I was seeing really codependent patterns pop up that I had been previously unaware of. And it became evident that the model for love that I was operating under was not mine. It was my mother's, and I had been kind of mimicking her patterns and her structures for operating within a relationship, and realized that the way I looked at love and being in love and being in a relationship was actually codependent. And it was something that I had never thought of before, because I had and still have what I considered to be the greatest mom in the world, an amazing support system, always there for me, 100% in my corner. And a lot of those positive attributes and aspects can actually lead to codependency. And so it kind of helped me, even as a therapist, reevaluate how we look at codependency and how we typically, or what kind of relationships or dynamics or childhood dynamics that we attribute it to. And you think that when you grow up in a loving home and have a parent who's always there and always supportive, that codependency isn't relevant, and it really can be. On this episode, we revisit the subject of lying to ourselves and dive deeper into our illusions, chat about how no one really actually knows what they're doing, how to live in a space of non-judgment while also having firm boundaries, and what I learned from past personal and business relationships coming to an end. Enjoy. I was reading a news briefing like once a day from the New York Times, and today I read it and I was like, I don't want to fucking start my day like this. I know what I need to know as far as like what actions I'm going to take. Done with it, because all I'm getting hit with is like a vast variety of different opinions that are reflective of those people's experience. Certain doctors will say one thing, and this is their opinion about going back to school, and they're freaking out. And then other people are like, no, it's fine. And then you got a 41-year-old who dropped dead and had no previous, health issues. And then I find myself being like, is that true? Did he not? Being like, well, that's kind of a bitchy response. And then it's like, well, it's because it's like scary. I don't know. Like, I read this story today, and it was about this Broadway actor guy, Nick Cordero, I think is his name. And he had been in the hospital battling COVID for 91 days, which is a long time, right? And then his wife was like, and he was 41 and healthy, had no pre-existing medical conditions. But when I started reading the whole history of it, he, in March, she's like, he'd been sick for a while, but we didn't know with what. He had pneumonia already. So he had pneumonia, and by the time he went to the hospital because he couldn't breathe, they tested him for COVID twice, and the test kept coming back negative. And the doctors were like, we know this is COVID. It has to be. Also, couldn't he just have pneumonia and be more susceptible now that he's in a hospital? Right. So then like the third or whatever test came back positive at some point, not shocked. His immune system's low. Right. He has pneumonia, which is basically what COVID does on steroids. And then he caught COVID and then had like a slew of other shit go wrong from there. But the story to me of this perfectly healthy 41-year-old with no pre-existing conditions dies of COVID complications and was ravaged by COVID is like, doesn't ring true for me. He had pneumonia. He was fucked because of the pneumonia. And I just, like that kind of shit, I wouldn't agree with that headline. And it bothered me. And I was like, well, and I was like, does it bother you because it scares you? Or does it bother you because you think that headline's bullshit? And I was like, I think the headline's bullshit. And it was just like once one thing would come up, they were like, oh, he had an irregular heartbeat. We had to intubate him. He was like in this coma for a while and pulled out the chest tube and there was an irregular heartbeat. So we went ahead and did surgery to give him a temporary pacemaker. I don't even know if that was necessary. And while he was on the ventilator, because of the ventilator, he didn't get blood flow to one of his legs, so they amputated it. Doesn't this seem like a fucking horror story that they're just like throwing out surgeries right and left to be like, uh-oh, we were convinced you had COVID even when you didn't, started treating you for it even when your tests were negative, and then you were positive, so we kept treating it and had to ventilate you because that's what we do. And then the ventilator stopped blood flow to your leg, so you lost your, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh, your heartbeat's irregular today. We're going to give you a pacemaker. Now you're dead. And it's just like, and maybe I'm seeing it that way because I've had this belief system take form since all this started where I'm like, nobody knows what the fuck they're doing.
That's exactly what that sounds like.
And I just am like tired of it. And it's like, that's fine. But like you're yielding scalpels, cutting off body parts, and this person's negative for this. You're treating him for it. Could it just be that he had pneumonia, had been sick with it for a long time, so his immune system was shit, and then being in the hospital, he caught it? Yeah, and that did him in at that point because he was compromised already. I mean, it was an awful story, regardless. I'm just sick of people trying to sell fear or whatever it is.
Well, because it doesn't fit their narrative. If some people would just check their ego and just say, I don't know. And of course you don't know. Nobody knows. This is all brand new. Just say, hey, I'm not going to try to fit his symptoms to my narrative just so I can feel like
because I'm scared.
I'm fucking scared.
Right. And and pneumonia, like long-term pneumonia does kill people. Like it's not a good thing. So like, I don't know how long he had been sick with that. She said he'd been sick for a while, but damn, I was like, I don't want to read this anymore.
I think a lot of what's going on now, everybody is so emotionally heightened right now. I feel like everything's been co-opted.
Yeah.
Like we gotta say things to fit our narrative here. And even though Black Lives Matter, that's all I'm gonna say about it. But like, I'm just like, that's been co-opted. I agree with the sentiment. The organization, I'm out. Just because they've taken it and gone somewhere else with it. You know, it's just like that. So I'm kind of with you. I actually deleted Facebook off my phone. I was like, if I really want, I'm trying to make it harder. It's almost like not having chips in the house. If I have chips in the house, they're gone. I'll eat them.
Yeah.
So they're not here.
That's
so I was thinking the same thing. I was like, Facebook. And you know what? It was funny is I deleted off my phone. I woke up Sunday. It was back on my phone.
So Saturday night, you decided to get
it. And you know what? It feels like an abusive relationship. I probably put it on my phone. Like, oh, what am I missing? I'm missing out. And, you know, and thinking about all the good, wonderful things about it, and then opening it back up and realizing, oh no, it's the same shit, and deleting it again immediately.
Yeah.
It's the absence of it. I idealize it.
Right. It's all the same, you know?
Yeah.
I love that. It's all the same. And since this started, it's like everything is micro and macro. It's all the same. So it's like, I idealize it because it's not there, whether it's, you know, the Facebook app or your like ex-girlfriend or whatever it is, it's all the fucking same. Mm-hmm. And our minds are just like so conniving that way. It's like, oh no, it's gone now. It's gonna be so much better. You know, I do that with relationships too. I'm like, when it's clear that all these issues exist, maybe like interpersonally and like, and you know, separately, individually, I get this idea of like, nope, like if I let go, like in a week, they're going to be like with the perfect person. And I just needed to like stay for another week. And then like they're going to like suddenly transform magically overnight into like fitting that dream. Like I am like the ambitious, steadfast, healthy, whatever. And that doesn't happen.
No. Never.
But like the fear of it, you know, it's like, oh, but that's what's happening right now. Probably out on their first date with like and then once they hit the perfect person, like they become immediately overnight. They were just waiting for the invitation to become their best version of themselves and it'll happen immediately. I really felt that way for a long time. I just unsubscribed to my daily news briefings because you inspired me and because I don't want to see that shit anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen this movie. It's one of my favorite movies ever, called Solaris. It's the best movie about relationships, I think. A guy goes, this planet will manifest whatever you desire most. And he manifests his dead wife who committed suicide. But it's not her, it's his interpretation of her. It's kind of like what you were talking about, like, no, I'm going to control the external. It's like, this is what I believe my wife to be.
What he thought she was, or was that what he wanted her to be, or what he thought?
No, that's how he knew his wife. It's like, your wife is not here, your interpretation of your wife is here now. So there's like so many problems that cannot be resolved because there's like, this is just your reflection of what you thought your wife was. It just makes me think about that. Like when you're talking about the illusions and trying to control like external, it's just crazy. And that's the thing, is like you assign all these roles and rules to people. You're like, they're their own person. There's so much shit that you don't know.
Oh yeah.
Like it's impossible. You'll never be able to control it.
No. And then once that illusion bursts, the bubble is burst, it's like, all right, well, I think that's like the phase I'm getting to now, where it's like with everything. It's like, all right, well, then what do you want? What do you like hope for? And it becomes so much more like vague. It becomes like about like growth characteristics. I think that's what it all comes down to. Something that's like adaptable, something that's open, something that takes care of itself. It's like built well and understands systems of change and can apply it to their own life. And that sounds so clinical, but that's really like what I'm looking for in any close interactions or dynamics that I have. It's like somebody who's awake and aware, and not just awake and aware, and at least most of the time do it well, apply those principles and does it. Because there's plenty of people I think that are like awake enough to be like, oh, like I see it. I see, truth out there. I see what's happening. And then like remain completely stagnant. They are unable to actually implement any action step into their own life that would apply that knowledge. And then for me, it's like, you can consume all the knowledge in the world and be like, oh, I have a pretty good grasp on things, or I'm even self-aware enough to kind of see projection all around me and all that kind of stuff. But I'm still so bound up by my own shit from the past that I'm unable to actually move forward. No, you need both. Like right. Knowing is not enough. It's like doing the work is just equally, if not more important, because it's like, better go back to sleep then. It might be easier than being awake and not doing anything. And, and everybody serves a role. So maybe people like that are here to be like disruptors and to like provide contrast for people. I just, had a session with Oz once, and we're talking about like lower vibrational energy or like dark energy from people. And some people's souls came down here to have experiences that are going to be muddy and like not awesome. And he's like, the only purpose of like understanding that about them is so like where not to be. It's like, oh yeah, that's not what I'm here for. I'm going over here. Instead of staying and trying to like give light to that person. It's like that person might be trudging through mud forever. That person might just be here to like stay stuck where they are, keep it moving. That's another episode I want to do. Maybe we'll do that one this week about what it takes to get started. Why so many people can't take the first step or have a really hard time taking the step. Was reading and feeling recently about feeling judgmental. And it's like, when you're, spiritually open and accepting of all and accepting of people for who they really are and like being okay with that, it doesn't mean you have to like accept their behavior. That's something that I've struggled with a little bit. And I think I've used it as an excuse in the past to stay stuck in things that I knew weren't quite right for me, because it was like this person's aware of like, the things that hold them back and all of this and like behaviors. If they're aware of it and they're okay with it and they get to live their life however they want, then like I need to get on board with accepting that. Because if you love someone, you need to accept them fully. Yeah, that's not true. But then I felt judgmental by being like, you shouldn't be doing that, or this bothers me. It's like, well, should it bother me? It's like, yeah, some shit is just not acceptable. And some people are better at selling it than others. Selling how okay being not okay is. And it's like, well, no.
You've just been describing growth this whole time, because go back to the illusion part of it. Just listening to that, I realized, and just here thinking about Like for me, like on a deep level, when I would do that, like I'm going to pick this external thing that I have no control over and try to like make a narrative that's going to work for me, and it's doomed to fail because I cannot do that. And if it's doomed to fail, I'm like, see, I have no control over everything. So guess what? Now I don't have to do the work. I'll just stay asleep.
Yeah.
And you're waking up and you're like, no, I want to fix everything now. So your illusions are disintegrating.
Yeah. It's just like you pick an impossible scenario and then try to make it work. And it's not going to work because you picked an impossible scenario. And then it's like, well.
Right. You're enforcing your narrative.
Yeah. And it's just like, that's the key. I think the easiest way to like not get caught up in that and question, like, am I just being judgmental here? Is like, when you get this strong signal, I'm not okay with this, you just fucking run with it. You're out. Or like you stand by it instead of trying to talk yourself out of it. Because once you start to waver, well, like, I don't feel okay with that, but this person really cares about me and like they're okay with it. And maybe I'm just not seeing it right. Maybe I could see it differently so that I could be okay with it. You're not okay with it. And maybe the lesson here is accepting and standing by what you're not okay with, even if you can't make the other person get it. I don't find these behaviors unacceptable. I still think that you're an innately lovable and worthy person, but these behaviors are like not okay with me, even if you don't think I have a right to feel that way. It's not acceptable.
Right. And through practice of that, you're not even going to care about that last part you just said. Like, it doesn't matter. It's like, hey, I'm not okay with that. You do you, and like move on. Like, it doesn't bother you anymore.
Yeah. That's like last week, and you're saying, you're like, just go through this pain for a little bit. And at some point the pain will go away. Like it'll heal and be gone if you just go through it. And that fits with it. And then I was talking to Naj last week too, and she was like, once you choose something, or she's talking about herself, but choosing something that she really wants, it's really in alignment with that dream. She's like, these other things won't even bother me. I'll look at it and be like, I don't have time for that anymore. It won't even bat an eye. And I'm like, yes, I don't have time for that anymore. You won't even care. And it's just in the honoring of that, even if it doesn't make sense. I think because for a long time, the last few years, I was caught up in different situations where people were trying to sell me pretty effectively that I should be okay with shit that I was just not okay with. That didn't make sense to me. You know what I mean? Even if it's something simple with like, my base expectation in a business relationship is for someone to be on time for their clients. And when you are chronically not doing that and it's been chronically addressed, at some points I was like, well, maybe that's okay. And like, when you do show up, you're really great. And like all of these things in my head. And then in hindsight, I could still feel like anger about it. It's like, no, never been okay. You trying to sell it that it's okay constantly. And the bigger picture, the macro part, it just degrades trust. Because to you, it's a small thing. So why is it a big deal? Well, small things are big things. Everything you do is everything you do, small, big, whatever. If you're not capable of doing small things, why the hell would I trust you with being able to do big ones? And it's like, if you have integrity, you have it all the time. You do what you say you're going to do. And it's like the bare minimum can't be met. And then you're trying to sell me why that's okay. And I like let it slide, keep adjusting it, let it slide. It's like, what? But it's just like still insane to me that some people can't even hold up like the bare minimum of propriety, of like politeness, of professionalism, you can't uphold the base, and you can't understand over time how that's like a huge fuck you. And then you try to like sell it to me like you're trying to sell it to yourself. And it's just like, what? And it's like relationships and entire systems can crumble based on a shaky foundation. It's a house of cards. If you can't even do the bare minimum and be consistent at that, you have no foundation. Everything else is shaky. But the things that I allowed to be sold, and then the resentment of being like, well, it must be nice having, your other half or your partner always be showing up and know that they're always going to be there and they're going to be prepared and they're going to be on time. And like, that must feel really nice for you. That's great. How does that not breed resentment? And like
how much of that is them acting in that way, or you just going so long accepting that?
I think it's both, because it was like, and this is what happens when I think it's a good example of wanting a dream and not really knowing if it'll happen, just kind of being interested in it taking on a life of its own. And then you waking up in a situation with somebody that like is the ideal partner for learning a lot of lessons with. but not one to grow something with, which was what the dream is, taking this concept and growing it.
Yeah.
So that was something, I think that was what I had the most frustration with, was like, I didn't mindfully choose or even know what I would want to choose, I think, in a partner of in that regard. Cause I didn't even know that it was gonna be like grow into that. And it did. And then knowing on pretty shortly after it started that like, oh, there's a lot of like cleanup here that has to be done interpersonally. And like we operate very differently. And like it's just like it's a business. Like here's the expectations, here's what needs to get done. Are you capable of doing these things? Yes, then do them. And to me, there doesn't need to be follow up on that. You either know that you're capable of it or you know that you're not. And again, when I was talking about sometimes there's enough parts that fit that you can be like, okay, no relationship, no, thing is perfect. That behavior still irritates the shit out of me, but I no longer accept it from anybody. So I no longer deal with it. I don't attract people that behave that way. But it was always like the edge of being like, do I finally admit how like impactful I think all of these things are and that everything you do represents you, or and like be done with it and give up everything that's been built so far? That was like the hard part. I know I'm not okay with this. I've addressed it 53 times, literally in writing. I can't make this person do anything. I get that. I also can't live like this and I can't be in a relationship like this. And there was nowhere to go. And so it was like, all right, you walk away and you give up everything that you put into it. And that was like kind of where I was. I gave myself empathy and putting up with it for so long, letting myself weather it because I knew I was weathering it because of everything that had been built. And then it just got to a place where it was like, you're an hour and a half late for a meeting, like done.
Right.
Like, this is ridiculous. No more. It just hit the fault line of, okay, yep, had enough. Do I wish I could have done that earlier on? Sure. But if I had, I would have short-suited myself on all the experiences that made everything else I do so much more rich now. So like I stayed, I think the perfect amount of time where I learned everything I needed to learn and did everything I needed to do, knowing why I was staying. And then once I hit that line, I was done. And I was done. And like I just want to get to a place where I can like fully release that kind of tension from it. Cause I still can think back on times and be like, and I'm sure like the counterpart in it, feels the same way. I think we both learned together how we best work and we work very differently. And I'm grateful for the experience because I like learned so much. I wouldn't want to undo it or be like, I would take all of it back so that we could still have whatever friendship we had. I don't feel that way. I think it happened the way it needed to and was like set up for the evolution of our growth and like do have sort of a hope, or not even, I wouldn't call it a hope, but an openness in my heart and head that like it'd be cool someday to like either pass by or like have a coffee and be like, okay, because we were reflections and projections of each other in a lot of ways and just like very stubborn and like met our own match in a lot of ways, just worked when it came to work and expectations for work very different. Like I can be very separate in that way, and the counterpart I don't think could. It was all kind of the same. It's a relationship. And for me, it wasn't. It was like, no, this is work hat. So I hope to have like more healing from that area because I still feel that like tension just because it was like, it's just conditioned. It was just a constant. I'm sure that we both felt like the action would cause me to be like, and then that would cause the backlash. And I would never tolerate that behavior now. And I don't, because I know I don't have to.
Right. That makes sense because, yeah, if you didn't do that, you'd probably still be dealing with it right now. Because it's like, oh, it's okay. Because it's a little bit like you needed to get hit hard. Like, okay, I'm done with this. I had somebody try to sell me the same thing of like, hey, not everybody's going to be, we're not going to be 100%. I was like, yeah, I'm not talking about movie preferences here. I'm talking about our fundamental belief structure. I was like, I'm not talking, it's not like we're disagreeing on what we're going to eat tonight. It's so weird. I was like, you're categorizing as the same. And I had to go through that over and over again to finally click in my head. I'm like, yeah, thank you for this, because now I know exactly what's important to look for in any kind of relationship from the very beginning now.
Yeah.
Like all the other shit doesn't matter. But I know what's important to me, and I had
Yeah.
to go through a relationship that I say I had no business being in, but no, I learned a lot from it.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
even knowing was like, hey, if this same person came along 2 years later, it wouldn't even been a thought to even get in a relationship with.
Right.
So it's yeah, I'm kind of grateful. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and I like what she said was she's come to terms with, she's like, I'm so grateful for my mother because she taught me everything that I don't want to be
Yeah.
as a partner and a mother. That's beautiful. That I was like, that's perfect. It's a perfect way to look at it. So so she's able.
I would,
I don't really want to take
okay,
her.
I would reframe. I would just have her reframe just for the don't. And be like, I'm so grateful for my mother because she taught me everything I do want to be and who I want to be. Because she did do that by giving contrast. But a lot of people are like, I'm so grateful for that. Or like, that relationship wasn't great, but I learned everything I don't want to be. And it's like that thought out loud to the universe, just, you know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah.
Attracts more of it. So I'm always like, wait, no, she taught you everything you do want.
Right. And
Yeah.
that person probably even said it that way, but this is my yeah, I have trouble with getting rid of all the negative. Like I had to hear myself or someone pointed out. I was like, did you hear all the negatives you just used? I was like, no, I didn't hear it at all. It just comes out.
Yeah.
And it's bad because as I say, it doesn't matter if I'm hearing it or not, I'm saying it. That means the thought's in there. It's almost even worse. It's like, no, you're always in the negative. Always.
Not always.
Right. And it's gotten better. I've been more aware of it, but it's just for so long it was everything's negative.
Yeah. It's just an active editing in your process. So it's like, wait, pause. Because I'll do that too. And I'll stop and be like, oh, but then you're focusing on the unwanted. You're phrasing it as the unwanted. Okay. And then you just change it. It's just an
Yeah.
active like red pen.
Yeah. I can have the most positive, wonderful thing to say and feeling really good. And I'll say it and people are like, damn, okay, are you all right? Are you all right? I'm like, what do you mean? Like I said something really nice and great. It's like, no, do you need help? Or we'll call somebody for you. It's just so bad
Yeah.
because everything I say is so negative.
Well, I mean, it's just, but even saying that, so not everything you say isn't so negative. I would say just, sometimes I have a tendency of like old conditioning and like I used to use, I'm literally talking about like sentence structure. I would use like the negative instead of the positive. So don't or can't or shouldn't or whatever. I think we talked about this years ago when I was about vulnerability, because that was the thing that I really struggled with. And it was like, well, I let this person know how I felt. I said, or I sent blank text. Because in my head, there's like this whole like other narrative and like all of these thoughts. And like it feels so scary and vulnerable. And then what comes out is like, okay, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that was huge for me. Well, that person still doesn't even know what the fuck, it didn't resonate with them. I'm like, do you think they know, like, how I feel? Because I said this. And it's like, no. Because to me, it was like, oh my God, vulnerability overload. I just let you know that, like, I care in some small way, which is huge, and I'm like, they will know from that, like, this is a really big deal to me. And I remember we talked about it and you're like, yeah, probably not. I'm like, damn it. And that's what that's like. Yeah. Where you're like, okay, guys, have a like super positive statement to make. And everybody's like, oh, because it's just your ladder climbing up.
Yeah.
And then, you just keep moving until you get there. And now I willingly have vulnerable conversations and you'll never use a double negative again. I totally sidetracked your story though, because you were talking about how wonderful it was that she learned from her mother who she wanted to be.
Yeah, that was the story.
Yeah. I'm Katie Kowaleski, and you've been listening to the SAS Podcast, where science meets spirituality with a sassy twist. You can follow the SAS Podcast through Instagram, Facebook, and our website using the links in the show notes. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube and subscribe. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review. If you would like to continue this conversation, visit our blog to join in on the deep dive for this episode where we explore this topic in more detail. Join me next week for another sassy conversation.